Will you please rise for the presentation of the colors?
Left, Well, good evening and happy Veterans Day to you. What a wonderful thing for Veterans Day to fall on a Sunday when we are able to gather. And for this to be a significant Veterans Day, marking the 100th anniversary of World War I's conclusion. So I guess it's the conclusion. Is that correct? Not the start, but the conclusion. I wasn't around at that time, so, yes, what a momentous occasion. I love Veterans Day. My father was a veteran. My father-in-law was a veteran, both of whom fought in wars overseas. And so I'm grateful for the contribution of all of our veterans. But you know something we don't talk about very often, and that's the role of the spouses of veterans. My mom spent a couple of years while my dad was overseas at home taking care of the home. I was born while my dad was in Korea. My mom was about 3 months pregnant with me when he was shipped to Korea, and so she went through all of that with my dad in Korea. And then my junior and senior year of high school, my dad was in Vietnam, and so my mom had to fulfill all of that duty while he was away fighting the war. So we often don't say thank you to the spouses of our veterans. And would you just do that with me right now? Let's just say thank you to those spouses of veterans. So I welcome you this evening. Let me lead us in prayer as we begin tonight. Lord, you are so good. And we're blessed to have been born in the United States of America, a nation that has extraordinary freedoms, a nation that recognizes that those freedoms come from you. They're not granted by a government. And so, Lord, thank you for a nation that protects freedom. And Lord, we're grateful for the men and women who have given of their lives and significant chunks of their time away from the family, sacrifices they've made, some the very ultimate sacrifice. And we thank you, Lord, that we are able to honor them and express our gratitude for them. And so, Lord, tonight I pray that as we remember the sacrifices they have made, that our hearts would be turned even to that one who made the ultimate sacrifice for us, who died for our sins, and rose again so that we might have true freedom in Christ. And we ask this in his name. Amen.
Someday, Liz, I'll go back, said Private First Class Peter Robert Zanetta of the 37th Engineer Combat Battalion and 1st Assault Wave to hit Omaha Beach. I'll go back and I'll see it all again. I'll see the beach, the barricades, and the graves. Those words of Private Zanetta come to us from his daughter, Lisa Zanetta Hen, in a heart-rending story about the event her father spoke of so often. She tells some of his stories of World War II, but says of her father, the story to end all stories was D-Day. He made me feel the fear of being on that boat waiting to land. I can smell the ocean and feel the seasickness. I can see the looks on his fellow soldiers' faces, the fear, the anguish, the uncertainty of what lay ahead. And when they landed, I can feel the strength and courage of the men who took those first steps through the tide to what must have surely looked like instant death. And like all the families of those who went to war, she describes how she came to realize her own father's survival was a miracle. So many men died. I know that my father watched many of his friends be killed. I know that he must have died inside a little each time. Lisa Zanetta Hen began her story by quoting her father, who promised that he would return to Normandy. She ended with a promise to her father, who died 8 years ago of cancer. I'm going there, Dad. And I'll see the beaches and the barricades and the monuments. I'll see the graves, and I'll put flowers there just like you wanted to do. I'll feel all the things you made me feel through your stories and your eyes. I'll never forget what you went through, Dad, nor will I let anyone else forget. And Dad, I'll always be proud. Through the words of his loving daughter, who is here with us today, a D-Day veteran has shown us the meaning of this day far better than any president can. It is enough for us to say about Private Zanata and all the men of honor and courage, we will always remember. We will always be proud. We will always be prepared, so we may be always free.
Purple mountains, majesty, and the waves of rain. This is my America, to thee we sing. Land of the free, from sea to shining sea. My America, let freedom ring. Purple mountains, majesty, and the waves of rain. This is my America, to thee we sing. Land of the free, from sea to shining sea. My America, let freedom ring. Purple mountains, majesty, and the waves of rain. This is my America, to thee we sing. Land of the free, from sea to shining sea. My America, let freedom ring. My America.
While the storm clouds gather far across the sea, let us pledge allegiance to a land that's free. Let us all be grateful for a land so fair, as we lift our voices
parents, if you would stand so your children can find you or wave, they'll come and sit with you. Nice job, kids. Didn't they do a good job?
It's hard to imagine a family more saturated in the life of a veteran than the family of Jeff and Camille Hornbeck. If you've been around Travis very long, you know Jeff and Camille. They're very involved in the life of our church, but they are the consummate family of veterans. And I wanted you to hear a little bit of their story this evening. Jeff, let's start with you. Tell us how you have served our nation as a member of the armed forces. Grab the microphone there. There you go. Good.
Well, I started as a cadet in Waco, Texas. After 12 months, I acquired wings and and gold bars, and that was the start. I also found Camille there. So I was a navigator and finally finished up as a weapons system officer. I had tours in a 121, an EC-47, better known as Goonie Bird, which was a backbone of a lot of the airlift in World War II, and a C-130, and the F-4 and the C, D, and E, which was the latter version. But more importantly than my military service was the fact that Camille and I were parents of Master Sergeant Hornbeck in the Army.
Tell us about Kelly. Obviously, you have an amazing story of sacrifices that you two have made, but then your son made the ultimate sacrifice. Tell us that story.
Kelly enlisted in the Army when he was the ripe old age of 19, 3 February 1987. He told me this was important. He knew what he needed to do. So I promised to pray for him and support him. I could be an Air Force mom. I'd been a water polo mom, a Boy Scout mom, and an Air Force dependent, spouse. 14 duty stations, 23 houses, 2 remote tours, 1 combat, 2 children by myself. Yep, it wouldn't be hard. I could be an Army mom. So he finishes advanced and basic and advanced training and goes to 3rd Infantry Regiment, the Old Guard at Fort Myer, Virginia. This was great. He was assigned to Echo Company, that's the ceremonial unit. He wore his dress blues, wheel hat. He was at the White House opening the Oval Office door, standing at the presidential chopper on the White House lawn. Perfect assignment. He carried the umbrella for Gorbachev on his first time. I loved this assignment. I could be an Army mom. It wasn't very long till he wheedled his way into H Company, a recon unit. Well, they just look out for things, right? Oh no, this was a combat-ready infantry regiment, combat-ready. His unit now planned all the training exercises. He was so excited. Mom, we did live fire training last night on the range. Live fire training. I'm not so sure about being an Army mom, but that change he made set the tone for the rest of his career. Before long, he was calling, Mom, I'm going to air assault school. I got a slot to jump school. Mom, I'm going to Ranger school. Oh. By 1991, he had finished that tour, and he had a Ranger tab. He was a newly minted Green Beret. I could sing the Ballad of the Green Beret. That was fun, until I learned that he was falling out of perfectly good aircraft. And with combat dive gear on, and infiltrating a submerged submarine. I wasn't doing very well as an Army mom. This was a little risky business. For 13 years, Kelly was in Special Operations Command. He had 5 years in the 3rd Operational Support Group doing something, and we never knew where he was, and I was never supposed to ask, but I would forget. Kelly, where have you been? Ma, you know you're not supposed to ask me that. Well, I thought I needed to know those details. What's up with the Army anyway? So I found out that week he died, Dr. Dean, that boy had been in Colombia doing things, with rebels, and they called it a combat experience. I'm glad I didn't know in 1994 that's what he was doing in South America. He did have 2 deployments to Iraq and 1 to Afghanistan. On 16 January 2004, he and his team were coming back from a night mission. By this time, he had reached the pinnacle of his desire. He was a team sergeant on a detachment from 10th Special Forces Group, airborne, of course, in Fort Carson, Colorado. He was the team sergeant. This was what he had trained religiously to do. They hit an IED. The driver of the vehicle in the convoy, the lead vehicle, had flash burns, slivers of glass. Kevin, you met him, and lost his hearing. The interpreter in the back seat had shrapnel in his shins and 1 thigh, and Kelly fell over into the lap of the driver. He was in the passenger front seat. They moved off the road and called forth ID. They brought some tanks to set a perimeter, and the medevac chopper came in, took Kelly and the medic to Balad from near Samara. And they tried to stop the bleeding from the head injury. Then they moved him on to the Cache, the big military field hospital in the Green Zone in Baghdad. In the meantime, that morning, our time, Kelly's battalion commander from 10th Group called Jeff to apprise him of the injury. When I came in from teaching, I noticed Jeff had on a dress shirt and khakis for a retired guy. That seemed kind of strange. Why was he dressed up? Well, he had gotten this call. People had been calling him and coming by. So Jeff shared with me. We cried a little bit, and we said, well, God has him. He's been in almost 17 years. They know what they're doing. And then the neurosurgeon, the chief of the neurosurgery department at the Cache, called us. And he made Kelly's situation very clear. He would be a primary candidate to donate his organs, but that was impossible in a combat zone. That he was not stable enough to be moved to the larger hospital at Landstuhl, Germany. And 3, he had no brain activity. The thought of Kelly lying there in a coma for years and years was more devastating perhaps than the accident. We quickly asked the surgeon to take all life support away from Kelly. But Kelly was strong, too strong really. He died January the 18th. And it was in that week following his death that we learned where he'd been in combat situations throughout his time in Special Forces and that crazy unit where he played ninja. And we learned many, many stories about him, and we learned how he had a plan, and he systematically set about gaining the training he needed to be the best soldiers he could be. He had told us before he left that his biggest concern was that all of his men come back home. I think he'd be really pleased to know that all 11 did come back home safely. Great. And all except 2 are retired now. God took care of us another way during this time. Kelly's last assignment, he was the team sergeant. His officer, his captain, was a West Point graduate. Well, that gave him a leg up on everybody else. We think pretty highly of those guys that graduate from service academies. but he was a devout, active Christian. Not just a Christian, he was a Southern Baptist. His family was, his wife's was. He and Kelly thought alike. They prepared for missions alike. They became really good friends, and unheard of, they became roommates in that safe house in Samara. So we're really grateful for, he was Captain Kennedy then, he's now Colonel Kennedy, in charge of special operations in someplace in the Middle East. And that was a really good thing that happened.
That's great.
It doesn't matter how many kinds of mom I am. I guess the most proud of mom I am, not the Gold Star mother or the water polo mom or the Army mom, is just that I'm Kurt and Kelly's mom.
Wow, thank you for sharing that, Camille and Jeff. As we wrap up here, Jeff, what does it mean to you to be called a veteran and to be the dad of a veteran who paid the ultimate sacrifice? What does it mean to you?
I think I can honestly say that I didn't plan to be a veteran. It wasn't something that I aspired to. I'm proud of it. But more importantly was you learn to work together, to be part of a team, to support somebody else. And your job, your duty is to support others. And so it happened to be a veteran, and I'm proud of it. My father and uncle were both in the U.S. Navy in World War II. I hadn't finished college, and there was a draft. So I found this aviation cadet program where I could get a commission in wings. And I thought about that. Nobody in my family had ever done anything like that, and I had no background. But I can tell you that once I got there and I started flying, it was a whole new world. I loved it. I loved it was hard and things were difficult sometimes, but there's something about flying that I just really enjoyed. The people, part of a team that did amazing things. It was the kind of thing that you see a little bit on television with professional athletes, because you can see their story. Most of you cannot really see the real military, but there's a lot of similarity there. I felt needed and useful. There were some hard times. Family separation is a bear. And now they're gone and they're home for a little while and they're gone, and the cycle never seems to end. But the separation is hard to deal with, and you need a strong spouse. I had one. I really did. I traveled a lot. Asia was seemingly had my name on it. I had tours in Vietnam, Okinawa, Korea, the Philippines. In Europe, I served temporary duty with TDY, temporary duty in England and Germany. Pastor, this morning you mentioned in your sermon feeling a part of something. Well, I felt a part of the military, and I just felt a connection to it. And it was, once it got fired up, there was never a question. People were always asking you, well, are you going to make a career out of it? Well, of course, silly. It was a natural thing for me. It didn't fit some people, but it worked pretty well for me, and I'm grateful to it. I was able to serve, and I guess I'm a veteran.
Well, on behalf of all of us here today, we thank you for your service to our nation. What an amazing story. Thank you so much. I'll get it. I got it.
This is the song for heroes who stand when others run. Their honor, trust, and valor remain when they are gone. This is the song for heroes whose lives speak more than words. They rise when they are needed. Their song must now be heard. This is the song for the heroes. This is the anthem of the strong who strike the chord of courage, defending right from wrong. This is the song for the heroes who give no matter what the cost, and they rush to the conflict. Their sacrifice will not be lost.
This is the song for heroes.
Some give the highest prize, but all make their decision to love honor more than life. This is the song for the heroes. This is the anthem of the strong who strike the chord of courage, defending right from wrong. This is the song for the heroes who give no matter what the cost, and they rush to the conflict. Their sacrifice will not be lost. Some fought in foreign lands,
And some remain behind.
but all have soared as eagles, defending freedom's light, freedom's light. This is the song for the heroes. This is the anthem for the strong who strike the chord of courage, defending right from wrong. This is the song for the heroes who give no matter what the cost, and they rush to the conflict. Their sacrifice will not be lost.
For the heroes.
For the heroes, for the heroes, for the heroes, for the heroes.
You know, when we think of veterans, we oftentimes think of older guys. But we need to realize that we have veterans in every generation, and particularly over the past few years when our nation has been at war in the Middle East. And so I'm so thankful to have one of the younger guys to tell his story. This is Charlie Irwin, and Charlie and his wife Jamie grew up here in our church practically, and married. The Lord has blessed them with two precious children. Georgia was in the choir tonight, and little Henry along with Georgia, and so we're so thankful your family is here, and you have served our nation valiantly. Tell us how you have been a part of the military service, serving our nation.
Well, it began in the summer of '98. I was in high school still, and I had a friend at a camp in West Texas that I was working at, and her stepfather came and said, "Hey, Charlie, I want to talk to you about something." And I had my senior year coming up, and I thought I was going to go to Texas A&M and just be a regular college kid, and he pulled me aside. He's like, "I want to talk to you about this place called West Point. I think you should hear about it." I said, "That sounds really neat." And really long story short, God orchestrated the circumstances that I was able to go to West Point that next year, that next summer. I was nominated by the Honorable K. Granger, and I went up there in the summer of '99, and I graduated in 2003 as an infantry officer in the United States Army. And after I pinned lieutenant, I went down to Fort Benning, Georgia, and I spent a year at Fort Benning, going to the Fort Benning School for Boys, which is the infantry officer basic course and jump school and ranger school. And I graduated ranger school in August of '04, and I out-processed Fort Benning and went to Fort Hood, Texas. I was assigned to the 1st Cavalry Division, who was in Iraq at the time. So I loaded up and went to Iraq in October of 2005, and the unit had already been over there for 6 to 7 months, and I fell in to an infantry battalion there in Baghdad, the 19 Cav Headhunters, and I was blessed to be given a platoon, and so I had a platoon of 40 infantrymen. We're mechanized infantry with Bradley fighting vehicles, so these big armored vehicles, they were really nice in Baghdad, and they had a lot of firepower, and they're very survivable, and they really took care of us. And I did 5 months there in Iraq with my platoon, and it was time for us to rotate home. We came home and got suited up to go to Hurricane Katrina right after we got home. So we went down to New Orleans for a little bit, and then I went and took over a scout platoon in our battalion, and then we were home for about a year, and then went back to Iraq. And that second deployment to Iraq, I was a captain by then. I was a company executive officer of an infantry company. We had 135 men, and we went back to Baghdad this time. Instead of being on the west side of the river, I was on the east side of the river, just east of Sadr City. And I did that job for about 8 months, and then I was called up to battalion staff, and I stayed there in the same unit, and we were there for 15 months that second time. And I came home on, I remember January 16th, 2008, and I out-processed from the Army about 3 or 4 months later. But it was really special because during my time there at Fort Hood, I was able to stay with pretty much the same group of infantry guys the whole time.
I know that in your description of everything, you have left out the incredible danger that you were in during that time. And I remember you being on our prayer list here at our church, and we prayed for you and the other guys in our church and family members that were in harm's way. But can you tell us of a time when you were really, you felt the danger, and you really felt the presence of God and the prayers of God's people? You have served our nation valiantly. Tell us how you have been a part of the military service, serving our nation?
Well, it began in the summer of '98. I was in high school still, and I had a friend at a camp in West Texas that I was working at, and her stepfather came and said, "Hey, Charlie, I want to talk to you about something." And I had my senior year coming up, and I thought I was going to go to Texas A&M and just be a regular college kid. And he pulled me aside. He's like, "I want to talk to you about this place called West Point. I think you should hear about it." I said, "That sounds really neat." And really long story short, God orchestrated the circumstances that I was able to go to West Point that next year, that next summer. I was nominated by the Honorable K. Granger, and I went up there in the summer of '99, and I graduated in 2003 as an infantry officer in the United States Army. And after I pinned lieutenant, I went down to Fort Benning, Georgia, and I spent a year at Fort Benning going to the Fort Benning School for Boys, which is the infantry officer basic course and jump school and ranger school. And I graduated ranger school in August of '04, and I out-processed Fort Benning and went to Fort Hood, Texas. I was assigned to the 1st Cavalry Division, who was in Iraq at the time. So I loaded up and went to Iraq in October of 2005, and the unit had already been over there for 6 to 7 months, and I fell in to an infantry battalion there in Baghdad, the 19 Cav Headhunters, and I was blessed to be given a platoon, and so I had a platoon of 40 infantrymen. We're mechanized infantry with Bradley fighting vehicles, so these big armored vehicles, they were really nice in Baghdad, and they had a lot of firepower, and they're very survivable, and they really took care of us. And did 5 months there in Iraq with my platoon, and it was time for us to rotate home. We came home and got suited up to go to Hurricane Katrina right after we got home. So we went down to New Orleans for a little bit, and then I went and took over a scout platoon in our battalion, and then we were home for about a year, and then went back to Iraq. And that second deployment to Iraq, I was a captain by then. I was a company executive officer of an infantry company. We had 135 men, and we went back to Baghdad this time. Instead of being on the west side of the river, I was on the east side of the river, just east of Sadr City. And I did that job for about 8 months, and then I was called up to battalion staff, and I stayed there in the same unit, and we were there for 15 months that second time. And I came home on, I remember January 16th, 2008, and I out-processed from the Army about 3 or 4 months later. But it was really special because during my time there at Fort Hood, I was able to stay with pretty much the same group of infantry guys the whole time. So I remember one of my first patrols with my platoon. I had not taken over as platoon leader yet with my infantry platoon, and I was just out. I was just attached to the platoon. There's already a platoon leader there, and they were doing a great job, and the guys were well trained, and we're overlooking this intersection. It was really our worst part of our battalion sector, and it wasn't a matter if you made contact, it was when. I mean, we kind of had average time to first grenade about 10 minutes. And so we go in these high-rise apartments, and I really don't know I don't know anything about the sector. I don't know what areas are bad. I don't know what areas are not as bad. And I don't know where the mosques are. I don't know. And so I remember there's a kid with me named Jeter, and he had a little light machine gun, and we're looking out this window, and I'm silhouetted up against the window, which means people, can, if you're looking out, you can see out, they can see in, and pop, pop, right there, a couple bullets hit on the window frame just next to me, and Jeter says, "Sir, get back," and I had no idea where the fire was coming from. I didn't know, I had no orientation, but he did, and he returned fire to this building across the street, and that was kind of the first gun battle I was in, and I really didn't know what was going on. And Jeter pushed me back, and And Dave Panion, who was the platoon leader at the time, he took the fight, and we called up another platoon, and they assaulted the building across the street. But in that first moment, I mean, God just took care of me. I was in the right place at the right time with the right people. I mean, and he took care of me there. And then before I took over that platoon, I was with one of my sister platoons, and we're on top of the Ministry of Education on the west side of the river. And another great place. I mean, it's this 2 or 3, I think it's a 3-story building, and you can look out across the Tigris River, and you have really far field, observation. And Fred Saxton, who's the platoon leader, he's pointing out all these places, like, all right, there's Sauter City right over there, and you see this bend in the river and that bridge, that's the northern limit of our sector. And he's just really orienting me to sector, because I'm the new green guy. All I have going for me is I have a Ranger tab. So the guys, they trust me for that. That's it. That's all I really have. But I'm learning the ropes. And no sooner do we leave the roof than the roof has 2 mortar rounds land right on top of it. And I thought very lowly of the enemy. I thought they would be doing good just to get a mortar in a mortar tube, but no, they were able to actually put rounds on top of the building we had just been standing on. And it's not a coincidence that we had just left.
God was watching over you.
Yes. So in the second deployment was a lot tougher.
It's okay.
But I knew that the second deployment was tougher because we just had a lot more that happened to us. The enemy was more sophisticated. We had a lot more casualties. But I had confidence. I had something that a lot of folks don't have. Like, I had confidence that something did happen, I was going to be taken care of. I knew that my wife would be taken care of. But I knew that from an eternal perspective, I was okay. So that was one of the things that, whether it is universal from the first deployment to that second deployment, I mean, it's all about mitigating risk and just taking care of soldiers. Because we have this mission, we go over there and our mission gets pushed down to us, and at the organic level, really that platoon level, as an infantry unit, our mission every day was attack to destroy. So we're going out there we're looking for the bad guys. We're either moving through sector trying to draw fire, we're trying to draw them out, kind of like punk kids, and we're trying to pick a fight, or we're out there trying to prevent a fight. We're out there because if we're out there, that means the enemy doesn't have freedom of maneuver. There's parallels with the church now. I mean, if we're out there and we're doing God's work, the enemy doesn't have freedom of maneuver.
That's right.
But over there, it was the same mission every day, attack to destroy. And so I had these 40 guys that Dave Panion left me with when he was the platoon leader, and he shook my hand and he left. He said, take care of these guys. And these guys were seasoned. They'd been doing it for 7 months, and that was my job. That was my only job. There was going to be another deployment for another group of guys to come in, another group of infantry soldiers, another group of fill-in-the-blank type of soldiers, because everyone was out there. And my job as a leader was to take care of them. So how did I do that? How did I manage that risk? Well, we'd get our mission. We kind of knew where it was, and we'd find a place where we're gonna go in our Bradley fighting vehicles, and we're gonna drop ramp. We're all gonna get out, and we're gonna walk the streets, and we're gonna be with the people. We're gonna be amongst the people. In my Bradley fighting vehicles, they're gonna go fill an overwatch position over here. They have 25 millimeter, that's 1 inch, 25 millimeters. It's a 1-inch diameter machine gun with explosive rounds, high explosive rounds. So it's a chain gun. It's really great. But that's there to provide support. And now we had 4 of those, 4 vehicles, 4 of those. And so I'm going to move up this street with these guys, with this infantry squad, and another infantry squad's going to move another street, and we're going to be bounding. And as we bound, the vehicles are going to bound. And we're doing all that. We make this plan so that we can take care of that risk, and we can be more survivable. We can be tougher. We can also be more flexible to be able to go turn and go to the fight somewhere else. One of the big things about those plans was, it wasn't just, this is our plan, we're going from point A to B to C to D, we're going to get back in the vehicles and then go home. It was, all right, if someone from first squad, my squads are Chaos and Rage. So if someone from Chaos gets injured, what are we going to do? Well, and we had our standard operating procedures. And the guys knew those procedures. And we had our tourniquets. Everyone knew what to do with their tourniquets. Everyone knew how to do aid. Everyone knew how to get that casualty to safety, relative safety, to cover. And then we knew that Sergeant Garcia was going to come up with a section of Bradleys, 2 Bradleys, and we're going to load those guys up in the back of the Bradley with the medic, and they're going to haul booty down to the cache, to the support hospital. We were blessed because that big hospital in the green zone was only a few miles away. So we were just going to run straight through there and blow through the checkpoint. But that gave my guys confidence. That gave my guys confidence because they knew that we could put them in a vehicle, and when that big armored ramp went up, they had confidence that they were protected from small arms and grenade fire. And they could move on. A lot of the guys didn't have confidence in what would happen if they died. For a lot of those guys, there was nothing after death to them. And that was terrifying for them, and it's a scary deal for them. So it's an opportunity to be light. And the same thing, I mean, there's such a great parallel there because from what the Lord tells us about almost risk management, because we had this plan and it gave those guys confidence. And hey, you're trained. Hey, you have at least 210 rounds of ammo on you, probably 300 rounds. You've got Rains back here with a machine gun. You've got 4 machine guns, chain guns on these Bradley fighting vehicles. We have a plan to take care of you. And God has a plan to take care of us. Mm-hmm. And that's a really big parallel.
Well, thank you for letting us kind of see inside your life in the war zone there, Charlie. You know, you're an engineer with Fries and Nichols. Jamie's a physician. You are making a contribution in your professions now. But what does it mean to you to be a veteran?
So to be a veteran, I'm not sure if we had I don't remember what pictures, I didn't look at the pictures that came up, but there's a picture of, recently I got together with my old scout platoon, and it means that I'm part of this fraternity, this brotherhood of soldiers that I served with. Yeah, that's the guys right there. So that was the War Pigs. We had a reunion about a month ago down in Belton, outside of Belton, Moody. Most of those guys are all out of the Army. But we trained together and we wept together. We lost one of our guys in a bad sniper deal, and another guy actually had the same bullet go into his femoral artery, and he bled out, and they coded him.
Wow.
But then, they continued to do CPR, and 12 to 15 minutes later, he came back. And so he had this miracle happen to him, and he's alive today, and he's lost as can be. And because, God wasn't done with him, and there's still a chance for Josh. There's still a chance for a lot of these guys. So we get together, and what does being a veteran mean? It means reaching out to these guys. Several of those guys went on to do a second deployment after our deployment in 06, 07, 08. And some of those guys went on to do a third and fourth and fifth deployment. And some of them are really hurting.
We need to remember that.
Yes, but we come together and we tell stories and we laugh and we weep and big tough guys, but we still hug and just care for one another. And even at my office, we have several veterans at my office here in Fort Worth, and when we get together, none of us served together. And some of them were even. Some of them weren't Army, and I give them a hard time. I give them a hard time about that. But they're still veterans all the same. And I have a bond with them, and we are able to laugh and giggle and act like 13-year-old boys. Because God uses knuckleheads like us in the church. He can use knuckleheads like us in the Army, in the Marines, in the Air Force, in the Navy.
Charlie, thank you for your service to our nation. We appreciate it. Thank you, man. Appreciate you.
Veterans, we thank you for serving well. And as you hear in this next song that the choir is going to sing, whenever you hear your song from your military branch, we invite you to stand so that we can recognize you and say thank you for serving us.
Give it out,
Let's join in singing God Bless America together. Orchestra. Let's thank our soldiers here in front tonight. I don't know how long they can hold that pose. Maybe we'll let them stay here for another hour or so. And the sound guys in the back, let's thank them as well. Thank you for being here this evening. Veterans, thank you so much. Y'all have a blessed evening. You're dismissed.